My name is David. If you see my face, my car, my bungalow, my clothes, you might think I am the living picture of success. But the truth is, inside I am a bad person. Where did this devastation begin? This is the story I want to tell you today. We were 3 siblings. I was the eldest, then my younger brother David and our youngest sister Natasha. Our father was a modest government school teacher, not strict, but very principled. Mom was always busy, searching for me before school, doing Natasha's hair in the evening, and helping David with his homework at night. I was a sensible child from the start, good in studies, well-spoken, but maybe that sensibility made me silent inside. I couldn't put my feelings into words, and the frustration inside turned into poison. David, my brother, was just a little kid, pampered, mischievous, always in Mom's lap, and whenever Dad had any food, it went straight to David's hands. Mom used to say, "David is the apple of my eye," and hold him close. I stood nearby, watching and listening quietly. No one suspected I was burning inside. When a child feels jealousy, he doesn't shout, he melts silently. One day, I still remember, it was holy. After prayers, we went to Mom. She gave David a sweet and Natasha one too. When I reached out my hand, Mom smiled and said, "Son, you've grown up, take it yourself." I stayed silent. She laughed, and I smiled, but my hand felt empty. Maybe she was joking, but a line was drawn in my heart. Some things fade with time, but jealousy's roots don't dry up, they spread. I studied day and night, always topping exams. Teachers praised me, everyone expected me to be successful. But my eyes searched for the pride on Mom and Dad's faces that they showed for David's small successes. When David got 60 marks in Hindi, Mom said, "Well done, my son." I was shocked because I had scored 97% in the same subject, but my praise was just a smile. Often David sat beside me and said, "Brother, you're really intelligent. I wish I were like you." I said nothing, thinking, try to be like me. Sitting in Mom's lap doesn't help. Our sister Natasha was a quiet presence between us. When we fought, she held Mom's dupatta and said, "Mom, don't scold the brothers. Both are good." But I knew Mom only considered David good. Dad was a quiet man, but whenever I won an award, he patted David's head and said, "Look how hardworking your brother is. You should be like him." I stood there wishing Dad would say, "You did great. I'm proud of you." That moment cracked my heart in ways no one noticed, not Mom, not Dad, not David, and silently I filled those cracks with jealousy. That childhood silence and strictness became like a stone inside me. Time passed. I reached high school, topping every class. That day too, Mom praised me in front of David, but it was the same faint smile. Then I decided I had to leave this home and become successful on my own. Mumbai was my path. The city was big, dreams were big. With a friend's help, we started a small printing press. Days at university, evenings working, nights planning instead of sleeping, life was running on this race. The first year was tough, the second a bit better, by the third year our work started making profits. We moved to a bigger office, built a team, got clients. I never looked back, only forward. After 2 years in Mumbai, I visited home for the first time. Mom blessed me, Dad lightly patted my head. David was studying in college and came to me saying, "Brother, you've come so far. I'm stuck with a small salary." I took a chocolate from my bag and gave it to him, saying I bought it especially for him. Mom remembered something and laughed, but even that chocolate felt like a favor. That night, Mom took me to her room and said, "Son, we are thinking about David's wedding. The neighbor's daughter, Natasha, is very sweet. You liked her as a child too." Hearing this, I bowed my head and said, "Natasha is good, Mom, go ahead." Anger rose in my heart, but I said nothing. Natasha, on whom I once had a little crush, was now my brother's bride-to-be. After returning from the village, I threw myself into work. Soon I had my own office, bought a car, opened branches. Months later, a client from Dubai came and business went international. My life was fast, my pockets full of every dream a young man could want. Meanwhile, I married of my own choice, a smart, sensible girl, daughter of a wealthy father, impressed by my personality. Our wedding was grand, village people invited. But I called only my younger brother once to tell him the wedding date and sent the invitation on WhatsApp. He said there was no need to come. How could my brother not attend his own wedding? He did come, but I was distracted on stage while he stood aside. Time had turned us from brothers into strangers. I thought he might suspect me, but maybe he only saw me as a brother now. I had changed. Months later, David married Natasha. Mom called saying he was very happy with his wife. I heard this and the next day kept writing business plans. One day David called asking, "Brother, I'm thinking of opening a coaching center. Can you guide me? It would help a lot." I quickly said, "Okay, message me the details." The message came but I didn't read it. He never brought it up again. The city lights blurred relationships for me. David entered my mind only sometimes, like the scent of old paper. I sent money occasionally to Mom and Dad, just asked about their well-being on calls, but my heart was elsewhere. One day Mom said on the phone, "Son, why don't you come home?" I said, "Mom, I'm very busy, no time." She said, "Whether you have time or not, you must miss your family, right?" I laughed it off. By then, I had 2 kids and was lost in a successful life. People came to take my advice, clicked photos with me. Once in an interview, when asked the secret of my success, I said, "Believe in yourself." But I couldn't say how many broken relationships lay buried under that belief. David still taught at a private college. Sometimes his name came on my phone, but I was busy, didn't reply. He never complained, just sometimes messaged, "Brother, I miss you a lot." I would just reply with an emoji and hang up the phone. My relationship was always mediocre. He was never a father who showed love, and perhaps I was no longer the son to be proud of. Years later, when David called, I was busy. Just after finishing a meeting, the phone rang. David said, "Brother, Dad's health is very bad. He's admitted to the hospital. The doctors say it's a brain tumor. Surgery is urgent and expensive." I went silent. Sitting in the car, I said hesitantly, "David, I've also been facing business losses lately. Funds are tight." David's subdued voice replied, "I know you're busy, brother, but I thought maybe you could help." I cut him off, saying, "Look, I can't do anything right now. I'm under a lot of pressure too." He thanked me and hung up. I took a breath, muted my phone, and opened notes for the next meeting. 2 days later, Natasha called saying, "Brother, Mom is crying a lot. Dad's condition has worsened. David took loans for his treatment, but the hospital is demanding more money." I ignored her and said, "Natasha, you don't understand the business troubles I'm facing. I'm very stressed. David is smart, he'll manage somehow." That night, my wife said, "You should visit your home." I said, "I have a meeting in the morning. It's difficult now." On the 3rd day, news came that Dad had passed away. I sat silently for a while, then started clearing files from my office table. I had to meet a client. David called again, but I didn't answer. Later, a message came, "Dad's funeral is this evening. If you can come, please do." I didn't go. I turned off my phone and went out for dinner with my wife. One day, Mom called weekly, asking, "Son, please send some money. David is under too much burden. I don't want him to break." I felt irritation inside and said, "Mom, my position isn't good either. Just pray everything gets better." One night, late, Natasha called crying, "Brother, Mom is no more." This time, I attended Mom's funeral, met people, but no one looked at me the way I wished. David stood quietly nearby. After the funeral, everyone was seated around Mom's frail body. I got up to leave. David came to me and said, "Brother, I need to talk." Without meeting his eyes, I said, "Go ahead," but nothing came out. After a few days of silence, David called. I was at the office reviewing project papers. Phone was on silent, so I missed the call. A WhatsApp message came, "Brother, please find some time. It's very important." I read it and after some thought called back, "Yes, David, tell me what happened?" He was silent for a moment, then said, "We took an 8 lakh loan for mom and dad's treatment. People are demanding money and some are threatening. We might have to mortgage the house. I was thinking maybe you could help." I interrupted, "David, same old problem. I told you before, I can't do anything now. Do one thing, sell the house your dad left you. You know I never took any share. If you're in trouble, sell it and clear the debt." David was silent for a moment, then softly said, "It's just a 4-story house, brother. If I sell it, I'll be left homeless." I laughed and said, "Building a home takes time, David, but drowning in debt won't help." Closing the file, I said, "Sell my share from your part. I'll sign the papers. I won't stop you." David's voice softened, "Thanks, brother. I'll think about it," and hung up. It was 4 p.m., nearly time for a video call with a Dubai client. I fixed my hair, looked in the mirror, and turned on my laptop. That night, my wife asked, "How is David? Heard some people are demanding loans." I said, "It's all drama. If he really had trouble, he would have sold the house. But people find it easy to sell emotions, not sacrifices." She looked at me surprised and asked, "Is he really in so much trouble?" I said, "How would I know? Even if he is, it's his problem, not mine. I've already given a lot." She was silent for a while, then quietly asked, "Is there no place for David in your heart?" I said no. The next day, as usual, I went to the office. A new client arrived and was welcomed grandly, tea, sweets, everything perfect. At one point, the client said, "Mr. Sunil, your story is truly impressive. You built all this yourself. Your family must have supported you?" I smiled for a moment, then said, "I believed in myself. Everyone has a family, but success comes to those who rise on their own." In the evening, leaving the office, I saw David on his bike with a bag on his back, probably coming from coaching classes. I watched silently through the car window. He passed without looking at me. At home, my wife told me Natasha's mom was seriously ill and not doing well. Natasha was also struggling. She's my brother's wife. She said the poor woman faces the buyers alone. "Have you ever thought what she's going through?" I said quietly, "Never. Everyone faces hard times." One day, a friend sent me David's picture from an old college seminar where he was a guest speaker, holding a microphone, with a slight smile. The caption read, "The story of an honest teacher." I looked at the photo and thought, this is the same man who owns nothing, yet commands respect. I put down the phone and started preparing for the next meeting. For many days, no messages from David. Then suddenly, a call came from David's mother-in-law. She said David's health was poor, the loan worries and children's fees burden all on his shoulders. If I could help, please do. I said if I could, I would. She said, "Son, wealth makes a man great, but if it shrinks the heart, everything is useless." I hung up without replying. I was in a meeting when an unknown number called. I ignored it. When it rang again, I put the phone on silent. Later, a WhatsApp message came with just 4 words, "David is no more." Hearing this, my body went numb. I switched off the phone and looked around at people busy with project presentations. I wiped sweat from my face and took a sip of water. Returning home in the evening, my wife opened the door with tears in her eyes, saying, "Natasha called, David had an accident and died on the spot." Only one word came from my mouth, "Oh." I took off my shoes and coat and placed office files on the table. After some time, I found an old photo of Mom and Dad, carefully looked at it. David stood between them, slightly bowed as if forever enough for them. The next day I attended his funeral. The village atmosphere was the same, the old courtyard, but there was silence. Natasha sat in a white sari in a corner, holding a small child, barely 3 years old, staring at the ground without looking at anyone. I approached. Natasha saw me and quietly stood beside me. After the funeral, a weight settled inside. People slowly started leaving. I looked at Natasha. She was sitting under the tree holding the child in her lap. I went closer, wanting to say something, but no words came out. Natasha's mother, Aunt Rachel, held my hand and said, "Son, David is no more. My daughter and grandson are left alone. The debt is still unpaid, and now they have no support." I looked away and said, "Aunt, I will see what I can do." She said nothing, only nodded silently. When I returned home, my wife asked if the funeral was over. I said yes. She asked if Natasha and the child were all right. I said they were like any widow and orphan would be. That night, I slept earlier than usual but kept waking up, feeling like someone was knocking on the door or whispering softly, as if saying, "Brother, you have come." The next morning at the office, there was a meeting about a new international project. Everyone was happy, drinks were served, cameras rolled, congratulations exchanged. I stood by the table among them, but my mind was on that silent child who had clung to his mother's lap after his father's death. 2 days later, Aunt Rachel called saying some debt collectors were coming to Natasha's door, threatening to seize belongings if money wasn't returned. Poor widow, she can't say anything or go anywhere. If you can help, please do. I stayed silent and softly said, "Aunt, my financial situation isn't good now. When it improves, I will think about something." She sighed and said, "Son, I expected this from you." The call ended. I laughed at myself, millions in deals, crores in tenders, yet no time for an orphan. A week later, Natasha messaged saying, "Brother, David's books and some old papers are with me. Some documents you should see." I read but didn't reply. One day Aunt Rachel called, her voice more tired, saying Natasha was very troubled, debt collectors were at her door. "I've called you many times but you never answer. She wants to talk." I thought for a moment, then said, "Yes, let her call." Shortly after, a soft voice said, "Hello, brother." I said hello back. She said, "Suraj brother, it's been very hard since David left. I sold the house and now live in a rented place. Still couldn't clear the loan. I can't stay with mom, there isn't space." I leaned back in my chair and asked how much debt was left. She said about 3 lakh. "I just request a little help from you, I will manage the rest." I went silent, Natasha's face came to my mind. I said, "Look Natasha, I feel sorry for you and your situation, but I'll be honest, what you want is possible, but on one condition." Silence fell on the other side. I continued, "My apartment is nearby. Come there tonight. The loan and money matters will be discussed there." At first, she said nothing, then with a heavy voice asked, "What did you say?" I just said, "I'm telling you the price for your peace." Silence again, then suddenly the call ended. I slumped in the chair, a hatred growing inside me not in words but in breath. Around 10 p.m. when I was leaving the office, reception called, "Sir, a madam is here to meet you. Name is Natasha." I was shocked. "Here?" "Yes, sir, she's waiting downstairs with a child." I said, "Send her up." A few moments later, the door opened and she entered in a white sari holding the child. She stood in front of me. I asked her to sit, but she stayed standing. I said, "Natasha, I'm glad you came." She didn't answer, just came close, released the child's hand, and slapped me hard on my cheek with full force. Silence filled the room. Then her voice echoed, "I am ashamed to say this, you are my husband's elder brother. I am the wife of the man who saw you grow up, and you made me a bargain." The child looked at us with frightened eyes. She moved toward the door, then stopped and said, "You have everything but no respect. Your palace walls are tall, but your conscience is buried underground." Then she left. I sat in the chair, my cheek burning, not just from the slap but from the dishonor rising inside me. The next day, the office was as usual, but a strange burden followed me every moment. That night, my wife asked, "Your phone was off yesterday. Was something special?" I dodged, "Had a late meeting." Her name was nowhere on the phone screen, but the moment kept echoing in my mind: the child, the slap, and Natasha's last words, "You have everything but no respect." 2 days later, Aunt Rachel called, saying Natasha was broken, barely spoke, ate less, and her son, Deshaun, kept asking, "Mom, where will we go when we grow up?" I listened silently but hung up and sat quietly for a long time. On the path to success, when everything is achieved and a slap shows who you really are, sometimes you face silence instead of a mirror. That night, for the first time, I felt I had lost something, though I already knew it. Days passed. The office ran as usual, but unease settled deep inside. Every face, every scene echoed that slap. Looking in the mirror, my face seemed a stranger's. Then one day, Aunt Rachel called, her voice calmer. She said Natasha told them she would never speak to me again. I immediately said, "Aunt, I want to apologize. I made a huge mistake. I'm ashamed." She was silent, then asked, "Are you telling the truth?" I said yes. "Aunt, I'm really sorry. I just want to meet her once." That evening, Natasha's number appeared again on the screen. "Hello, Suraj brother." I replied, "Natasha." I just wanted to hear that she accepted talking. She said, "Mom said you want to apologize." I said, "Yes, what I said was terrible. I don't know why I wasn't myself then." She was silent, then softly said, "What you said wasn't just words. It broke a lot." I said, "I know, and I just want to say meet me once. I want to apologize face to face." She said, "No brother, we can talk on the phone." I said, "Natasha, this burden won't leave my heart unless you look at me and say you forgive me. I'm in a meeting. I'll send you the address. Can you come?" After a pause, she said, "Okay, I'll come but only for 5 minutes." I said, "All right." I reached the hotel where I had already booked a room and told the security guard to send Natasha directly to me. At 4:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. I opened. Natasha stood there in a white sari with a bag in her hand. She greeted me. I said, "Come in." She said, "Let's talk here only. I have to go back. Deshaun is home alone." I said, "Yes, come sit for a bit." Hesitant, she entered. I closed the door and took out a bottle of water to offer her. I said, "Natasha, you are my brother's wife. You are my respect. I am very ashamed of what I did." She bowed her head and said, "If you are truly ashamed, then never do it again." I softly said, "I just want to make one last request." Then I came closer and changed the tone. I said, "Natasha, you are so beautiful. Looking at you, it feels like time has stopped." She was startled and stepped back. She said, "Brother, what are you saying?" I moved forward, locked the door, and said, "You slapped me, didn't you?" I didn't say anything at that time, but now I want to settle that account. She said, "Brother, please, what are you saying? Leave me. Just once, it will all end. Then the debt, the respect, everything will come back to you." She stepped back and leaned against the wall. She tried to stop me with her hands and said, "My husband had so much right over you that I could stand in front of you with my head held high. But you took something away." I ignored her and was busy extinguishing my own fire. With passing moments, her screams were silenced. Her respect was trampled. She quietly got up and moved toward the door. I didn't want to say anything. Without turning back, she just said, "You are dead to me now." The door closed. Silence filled the room. I sat on the sofa, taking deep breaths as if I had won a war. My revenge was complete, the same revenge for the slap. I had destroyed her respect. The wounds inside me were settled, but maybe something remained incomplete. There was light in the room, but I started to feel disgust even at my own shadow. I reached home late that night. My wife asked where I had been and why my phone was off. I said I had an important meeting. She asked, "What important meeting? Why didn't you call Natasha home? Why at the hotel?" I was stunned by her words. I said she had told her about it. My wife said yes, she had called in the morning. I lied to my wife that Natasha came only to talk about the debt, kept asking for money, and since I was busy, I called her to the hotel. My wife looked at me and went into the room. I stood near the door. I had the world's wealth, respect, and power, but inside was a stench no fragrance could hide. The next morning, silence filled the breakfast table. My wife glanced at me many times but said nothing. I picked up the newspaper, took a sip of coffee, and started checking phone notifications. My wife's eyes were fixed on me. She said Natasha had called in the morning. I put down the newspaper and softly replied that she only talked about the debt and needed some money. I said I had no time, so I called her to the hotel. She said, "And you two were alone there?" I said yes, we just talked, nothing else. She was frustrated because I was not helping her and now trying to distance her from me. My wife fell silent. Thinking the conversation was over, I got up and went to the room. There was something in her silence, a suspicion, a doubt. That night, I went to sleep but couldn't fall asleep for a long time. There was a strange uneasiness. When I finally dozed off, I saw a blurry scene in my dream, David dressed in white, looking at me standing near trees in a forest-like area. He slowly said, "Brother, you still have to become richer. There is a treasure where my funeral was held. Go get it. Hurry, brother." I woke up suddenly, sweating on my forehead. My wife, startled, asked, "What happened?" I said nothing, just had a strange dream. My wife said, "That was David." I looked at her surprised. I asked, "How did you know?" She said, "I've felt for days you have been different." Saying this, she went to drink water. The next day at work, my mind was scattered. I kept opening and closing files. I found an old notebook where David had written some notes in childhood and had given it to me. As I flipped pages, the same dream came back. There was treasure where my funeral was held. Laughing, I thought, am I really believing dreams? In the evening when I reached home, another strange incident happened. My wife said a beggar came to the door and only said, "Give something in David's name." I was stunned hearing this. I asked, "What?" She said he was strange, with white beard and a stick in hand. I changed the topic but a fear grew inside me. Dream, beggar, and David's name all felt connected. That night, the same dream appeared again. This time David came close and said, "Brother, time is very short. Hurry. The treasure is for you. If it falls into someone else's hands, you'll be left empty-handed." I woke soaked in sweat, breathing fast. My wife was awake and asked, "Was it the same dream?" I nodded and said, "Yes, and this time it was clearer." She said, "But it's just a dream. Don't chase dreams. You need peace. Maybe your conscience is finally speaking." I said nothing. The same image kept spinning in my eyes. Even during work, my mind drifted there repeatedly. Listening to clients, replying, but a picture kept flashing, David mentioning the cremation ground and hinting at treasure. After these dreams came for 10 nights, I decided not to tell anyone. Night fell, and I set out on the village road. The road was silent, it was raining. I stopped the car in the village lane. Silence was everywhere. The cremation ground walls were quiet. I stood where David's pyre was lit. The moonlight was faint, humidity in the air. I looked closely at the ground. There was nothing unusual but my heart raced. Then I turned back sensing a sound. I switched on my phone torch but saw nothing. Turning again, I looked at the cremation ground and softly said, "David, if you want me to look here, give a sign." Moments passed. Then a gust of wind blew. The soil near a tree at the cremation ground sank a little. I was startled and my heart beat faster. Suddenly, a thought came, maybe it's my delusion, maybe it's my own mental trouble. I sat there for a while. I didn't lose or check anything. Just stared at the ground with empty eyes. Driving back, I kept looking in the mirror as if someone was sitting behind. Truth had now become a shadow walking with me, not hiding, not letting me rest. It was late night. I left the office late but didn't feel like going home. I turned the car towards the old road leading to the village. For days, an uneasiness had been inside me. The only way to break the dreams was to go back to the cremation ground. I went there one last time. The trees were shaking loudly, maybe due to wind or my mental trouble. But today I came to check why these dreams were not ending. Entering the village, I dimmed the headlights. The road was deserted, shops closed, every door and window locked from inside. I got off the car on the narrow lane to the cremation ground and walked. The ground was damp at every step. Reaching the wall, I climbed carefully inside. No torch in hand, just phone light to help. Silence everywhere. The tree branches moved slowly, as if wanting to say something. Approaching the spot where David was cremated, I was amazed to see a shadow sitting near a tree close by. I immediately shone my phone's light ahead and was blinded. Natasha was there, wrapped in a white sari, sitting on the ground, and with her was little Ethan, resting on her lap, sitting quietly. I was stunned. I had never seen such a sight even in my dreams. I said, "Natasha?" She lifted her head and looked at me. There was neither anger nor fear on her face, just a strange silence. I asked, "What are you doing here right now?" She said nothing. I looked at Ethan, who was looking around. Then Natasha softly said, "Today marks 1 year since David's death. You don't remember?" I was silent for a few moments. The truth was I really didn't remember. I said, "I just came here like that." Natasha said, "Just like that, or chasing a dream?" I was startled and looked at her. I asked, "How do you know?" She said, "Your wife told me that you came here a few nights ago and your sleep and condition show that you are not at peace." I turned my face away and sat on the ground, saying, "Natasha, I am very ashamed of what I did to you. More than shame, I cannot even face myself." She said, "And I realized your shame that day when you called me and took advantage of my helplessness, my silence. Since then your dreams began, when your inner self started awakening." I said, "I don't know if it's a dream, a punishment, or a sign. Every night David comes to my dream and says only one thing, that there is treasure in the cremation ground." Natasha laughed loudly and said, "Treasure? Maybe that treasure is forgiveness for you or a lesson, but you still haven't even dug this ground here." I said, "Yes, maybe because I'm afraid, maybe I'm sure there is nothing there." She said, "Maybe you're afraid that what you did to me might get buried in this earth." Her son quietly said, "Mom, will Dad come back?" She hugged her son and said, "Son, Dad will now meet us in dreams." I was about to leave when there was a commotion at the entrance to the cremation ground. I was startled and looked. Some people had gathered, some men from the village, and Mrs. Rogers was also there. Their eyes were fixed on me. Mrs. Rogers stepped forward and said, "Why have you come here, Suraj? To take something or to hide from your father?" I tried to reply, but my tongue stumbled. Natasha stepped forward and said, "Today is the time to speak the truth in front of this cremation ground. Today this ground will decide whether you are human or just a shadow." I could say nothing. There was no treasure under the ground. But today I felt the shadow of truth entwined with my breath. Silence had spread there. Natasha was still there, her son clinging to her chest. In front were Mrs. Rogers and some villagers. There was astonishment in their eyes, no one spoke. Natasha slowly stood up, handed her son to Mrs. Rogers, and approached me. Her face was calm, but her eyes scared me for the first time. Coming close, She lifted the pallu of her sari from her stomach and pulled out a dagger hidden there. The silence was about to burst into a scream. She said, "Today, right here, on this soil, I have come to deliver justice. Here my husband's pyre burned and justice was done. But now your justice must be done." I stepped back, but my tongue was tied. Mrs. Rogers shouted loudly, "Don't go mad, Natasha. What are you doing?" The villagers quickly moved toward her. One snatched the dagger, another pushed me back. But in that moment, the fear I had probably couldn't be avoided. Natasha said sharply, "The one who ruined my marriage, buried my honor in the dirt, he is not worthy of asking forgiveness from this land." Mrs. Rogers stepped forward, held both her hands, and said, "Daughter, if you kill him today, everyone will say Natasha was immoral and killed to hide her crime." Natasha was gasping, but her hands dropped. The dagger fell on the ground. One old man among those men said, "Now the matter will be heard. A decision will be made about him and you." Everyone looked at me. I closed my eyes for a moment and then said, "I am ready. Ask whatever you want. If you have to punish me, do it." Natasha stood silently. Mrs. Rogers took her aside. The village head, Mr. Wilson, held a council meeting where all the important men gathered. Sitting on a cot, Mr. Wilson said, "Suraj is the son of a respectable family. But what you did with your brother's wife is a grave crime." The village chief said, "This decision will now be in front of all of us, and justice will be what David's son deserves, this son whom you made an orphan, and this woman whom you widowed and came to plunder." I stood with my head bowed. A villager said, "We have decided to give half your property to David's son. The rest is for your children so that your children also equally bear the burden of your crime." Mrs. Rogers added, "The debt David took will be remembered. Will my daughter remain alone? You will pay for all that too." I said, "Okay, I accept everything." Mr. Wilson asked, "And you must also accept the punishment for the sins you committed?" I replied, "Yes, I accept all." An old man came to me and slapped me on the cheek, saying, "This is just the beginning." Then another man pushed me down to the ground. For a few moments, they insulted me. The young men of the village slapped me too, beating me until I fell in the dirt. I asked for no forgiveness, no request. What was happening was nothing compared to what I did. Finally, Mr. Wilson raised his hand and said, "Stop now. This will be handed over to the law. He will go to jail and only return after serving the sentence." Natasha stood with Mrs. Rogers and said, "We want justice, not revenge. Today we have received that." I stood up from the ground and said, "I accept everything: jail, cruelty, humiliation." A few hours later, the police came, took action, and I was put in custody. But the surprise was that for the first time, there was peace in my heart. I had signed papers for Ethan's custody. I had fulfilled my duty and quietly faced imprisonment. For the first time, I felt I might be moving toward becoming a human. The first night in jail was strange. Things hitting the walls slowly turned into prisoners speaking, and an emptiness in between. I tried to lie on the bed, but memories of the past roared in my mind. A guard on rounds threw a sheet and said, "Look, big people won't be able to sleep." I kept quiet. There were 2 other prisoners in the room, but no one spoke. They looked at me like a movie character had appeared, like I was some special criminal, and maybe I was. Till morning, I didn't sleep, nor did my heart lighten. The only thought was whether I could get forgiveness now. After some moments, a jail staff came and said that some papers related to my business had arrived from outside. I signed them and checked the documents. The lawyer had completed arrangements under which my company's profits would be divided into 3 parts every month, for my 2 children and David's son Ethan. This was the decision I accepted as per the village elders. I said to myself, this is not just about money. It is the repentance of my mistakes. The first year I spent understanding prison life. The second year I started reading. The third year I learned to write. Days and nights passed, and with time, my existence became silent. In the four walls of jail, a man's pride naturally dies. I, who used to sit behind the shining office desk and decide people's fate, now counted soap and brushes for prisoners in a small storeroom. One day a prisoner said, "I have heard you were a very big man." I gave a modest reply, "No." He laughed and said, "There is no such thing here. Everyone is equal here, only the crime differs in size." I just said that some crimes are visible outside a person, and some are buried inside. The 7th year came, and a guard informed me that my daughter's wedding was fixed. The dowry was being arranged from my share of the money. I was silent for a while, then quietly said, "Okay." I said, "If you get a chance, just tell her that her father is happy." In the 9th year, a letter arrived, not from Natasha, but from her mother. They wrote that Ethan was now 9 years old, doing very well in school. Every month's money was enough for his fees and books. But he still missed his father a lot and said, "Dad's brother gave me everything. When will he come back?" I wrote no reply, but that night I couldn't sleep till late. After 15 years, the release date approached, and the superintendent called me. When I entered the room, he said, "Suraj, during your imprisonment you caused no trouble. Your behavior was good, you focused on work. You were a different kind of prisoner." I said I wasn't a prisoner, just a criminal. The imprisonment was in my heart. On the day of release, my clothes were returned, shoes, old phone, and the wallet that had been taken from me years ago. When I stepped outside, the sky was the same but the light was very different. No one came to welcome me, and I hadn't called anyone either. When I took my first step on the road, it felt like the ground refused to recognize me. I returned to the city, passed near my old house, the same walls, the same gate, but the door was closed. I stepped into a rented place. For work, I went to the office. My old manager was there. He greeted me, showed me files, gave reports. I just asked if Ethan's money was being given to him on time. He said yes, it was given on the 1st of every month. I looked at the files and found an old photo of David and me standing in school uniforms as kids. I kept that photo in my pocket. 6 months had passed since release. I had taken charge of the office again. Meetings were held, files came and went, and I silently observed everything. The new team members knew me, but the unfamiliarity in their eyes wasn't new to me. I had learned to act like a stranger. My business was making a profit. Money was being deposited on time in accounts. Children's fees, household expenses were being managed. But it was not the same as before. My wife was at home, but there was no relationship between us. There was silence at the breakfast table. At night, there were 2 people breathing separately between the walls of the room. One day she said, "Suraj, have you ever thought? You didn't just betray Natasha, you betrayed all of us." I didn't turn to look at her. Maybe that was my mistake. My daughter, who was married, came one day with her son. Her son asked, "Grandpa, where did you go for so many years?" I smiled and replied, "Son, it was a long journey, a lot to learn." His mother quickly changed the subject and said, "Come on, don't bother Grandpa." I realized that my mention was now cautious in front of the children, like an old matter not to be repeated often. Even today, I give Natasha and her son their rights, but I still am not able to meet their eyes. Sometimes a person dirties himself so deeply that no fragrance can hide it. My relationship with my wife is still not good. But I am just a person living life in silence and regret. Wealth earned by ignoring love and relationships gave only loneliness. A person's true nature lies in his character, not in his success. Friends, I hope you liked our story. If you did, please like the video. If you are new to the channel, subscribe, and yes, do press the notification bell so that you get the next update first.